Iowa Soybean Association is driven to deliver for Iowa's 40,000 soybean farmers. We're proud to provide objective agronomic research, a helping hand with soil and water stewardship, and timely industry news powered by the Soybean Checkoff. Learn more at iasoybeans.com.
Welcome into the MTOM podcast studio. I'm Paul Yeager. This is a production of Iowa PBS and the Market to Market TV show. We're bringing back a guest, but a new conversation because the situation has changed for Tim Dufault. He is a farmer from Crookston, Minnesota. You see him participate in our program from time to time. Tim in Minnesota, maybe $6 wheat guy, contributing a question. Things have changed with him and his farming situation. We're going to talk about his retirement. But what he did with the land, to me, is what makes this very interesting. And just as a famous saying goes in our family, something to think about. We'll talk about what led to his decision, what he's trying to do now with this next generation of farmers, and what's next for him. That is this episode of the MTOM podcast. Let's hear it now. Tim, I'm going to open with an apology because the last time you and I talked, I did the unthinkable and misspelled your name. I am so sorry for that still to this day. I think about it a lot.
You're not the first one. So many times it's spelled default, you just forget about it.
Well, we last talked right early days of COVID, I think, and you had been out to Washington to be on a panel, and I kind of asked you about some of that. But let's recap a little bit. You're farming in northwest Minnesota. Is that north, or do you call it northwest? What's your geographic location?
Because northeast Minnesota is more the forestry and the lakes and stuff. Northwest is more the prairie, so that's the agriculture area. So yeah, I'm just east of Crookston, Minnesota, which is northwest Minnesota. We're 35 miles from the North Dakota border and about 80 miles from the Canadian border. So we're up there a ways.
How did the year go for you?
Another challenging year, Paul. The last winter was beautiful, mild. The spring started out fine, and then it started raining and raining and raining. So we started planting in second week of April like normal, and I didn't finish until into June, which really wears on a guy. And so that's the third year in a row now. We finished planting in June, and I don't know if my whole life before that, if I ever had 3 years where I finished in June, but here they were back to back to back. And then the growing season, it stayed wet, which was concerning, but then kind of dried out there in July and August. Had a decent wheat crop. Field dependent. If you got the field in early, it was fantastic. Some of the later fields weren't so much. Same with the soybeans, had a couple fields that just had, home run for yields, and a couple of them just struggled with too much water. So, that's farming.
Well, I interviewed somebody from Blue Earth, which is couple hundred miles south of you, of course. But were you getting as much rain as they did along I-90? I mean, 200, 300 miles north?
Yeah, they had that 1 week where they really got pounded, and we didn't have anything like that. We were just always getting 3/4 of an inch or an inch, every 4 or 5 days or something like that. But they got flooded out there, and they lost a lot of cropland or a lot of crop from that.
And if you get too much rain, you're in the ponding area, right? Where ponds will stick around for a long, long time?
Not really. So we're in the bottom of an old glacier bed, and everything flows to the Red River of the north, the border of Minnesota and North Dakota. So there's a fair bit of slope from where I'm at that, you got to do ditching and everything, but it's pretty good.
Speaking of good, I guess I'm already kind of like thinking about, your year and just processing the weather. I mean, when did you finally get rain in the fall, or has it not fallen yet?
It was about, it wasn't until November, really. And we kind of needed that. So we had a glorious fall. If we had falls like this every year, so September, October, were dry, above normal temperatures. The middle of August, guys were worried that corn wasn't going to make it. It wasn't going to make it. And come October, they're combining dry corn, and it was great. So we had a wonderful fall. And then, yeah, in November we probably had 1.5 inches of rain before it froze up now. So we're sitting okay.
Anything significant about this year's crop?
Well, the price is terrible, but no, otherwise, the region had a pretty good overall crop year.
I'm not saying we're breaking news. You've announced it publicly online. This was your last crop.
Yep. Yep.
When did that
time to hang
decision
her up.
get made?
Last year, I just, I'm 60. Well, I'll be 61 here in January, or 65 in January. You can't farm forever. Although when I did say I was retiring, people were saying, well, geez, farmers never retire. Well, this one's going to retire. Yeah, it just, none of the kids were going to come back to farm. And so why keep going? I farm with my older brother. He's 10 years older than I am. So it's just getting to be more work for both of us. And then, like I say, the last 3 seasons with the late spring, you just never had a break during the growing season to get away for a vacation or a weekend even. And after a while, it's just like, why am I doing this? It's time to hang her up. Let somebody else try it.
Well, your brother, I can't remember. I mean, as I knew you, I remember you farmed with your brother, but I forget what his family situation is. I mean, does he have kids that are interested?
No, he doesn't either.
So is this you're holding on and going to rent, or are you going to sell everything?
No sense in selling this yet. So we're renting it out. I've kind of had an X on my back for several years from the neighbors. But I, and so I've rented out to 6 different young guys, and I tried to make everybody happy. Just I give everybody a little bit, but I wished I had more land to help these guys out with, but they're all getting a good start, and yeah, it's good for the community.
And that's what's intrigued me, and that's why I wanted to connect. So was there a process that you had with these farmers? Because, there's always that, the old adage, when the farmer dies, before the visitation happens, there's already 6 farmers at the door. Hey, it's good to see. We all know why you're there. When it was known, when you said you had an X on your back, I mean, did you have a process that you were going to go through? And what was it to determine who was going to be those farmers? You mentioned young. Was that item 1?
Yeah. I had one guy ask me, he's a smaller farm, works in the bank full time. And he was asking about land. And I said, well, I hate to upset you, but, he's 41. You're too old. I wanted to keep it as young as I could, or the smaller operations. I had one guy pull in the yard. He's older than I am, and he was asking for his son. And I'm thinking, well, why isn't your son here? And well, they lost a few hundred acres, and they could really use some more. And I said, well, how many acres are you farming now? Well, 5,000. It's like, yeah, you're probably okay, But so the ones I've rented to, they're from small cattle herd. He's renting 60 acres for alfalfa to, well, I don't know if there's anybody. Yeah, the one, they might be at 2,000 acres would be the biggest, and he's the neighbor coming in to start with the other farmer. He's taking him under his wing. That's what I really wanted to do. If I could have like a turnkey a few years ago with someone, bring someone in and say, here, work with me for a few years. But it was hard to find somebody like that. The state of Minnesota Department of Ag has a website where they try and link up retiring guys with young guys, but there just wasn't enough interest for someone around here that wanted to relocate. So I had to go the other route and just rent to the guys in the neighborhood.
That website, how old or how long has that been around?
Oh, probably 5, 6 years, or at least that I know of, maybe a little longer.
And so the goal is always to do kind of what you did and find land, farmer, partner.
Right, right. Yep. Somebody that wants to give it, give a next generation a chance, someone that doesn't have land but has a passion for agriculture. But then that's a tough hill to climb too, because it's so capital intensive. Unless that young person's got some a good banker behind them, it's tough to buy into an operation. But I was willing to see what we could do, but I just couldn't find anybody.
Because I'm guessing, Tim, you could have, or you may have left some dollars on the table if you would have gone with a larger farmer who might have been able to pay more for rent, but you are taking it as an opportunity to get someone started. Was that part of your motivation as well?
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, yeah, I could have turned it over to one of the mega farms in the area and rented it out for top dollar and moved to Florida, but that's not us. That's not what my wife and I want to do. So, you look around in the churches or the school district, the stores, the storefronts downtown. Let's keep as many farmers as we can going. That's what I want to do. And we're at a good point in our financial situation that I can afford to leave a few dollars on the table.
Commonality, everybody's under 40. Is that what I gather?
Yeah, I think the one is probably going to turn 40. But he's the guy that he's had a small beef cow operation, expanded that a little bit more. Doesn't have any land, so last year he asked me about renting out some. I've got some rolly land along a creek that's odd shaped and everything. He said, "What if you'd rent that out for alfalfa?" And I thought, that's a beautiful idea because now we could help with erosion and and cut up. So yeah, here you go. And so he's the oldest one. I got one that just graduated college here about a year ago. Um, yeah, there's a couple of them that are under 25, so it'll be fun to watch these guys grow and mature.
Absolutely. Did you put parameters on, checking in with you or running plans by you? Like when you said one cut into alfalfa, but were there any rules, I guess, that you put in on these guys?
No, not really. Um, I did offer everyone. So I've gone to, well, I'll call it no-till. Everybody's got a different definition of no-till. It depends on what area of the world you live in, but I've pretty much gone to minimum to no-till. And I told each one of them that, if you go to no-till, if you want to do that, I'll cut your rent by 10%. Because I'm protecting my asset. Like I told him, this is my asset. If I had an apartment building, I wouldn't want to rent to people with pets or smokers. And so I'm going to be protective of my land and we're going to work together on that. So I've got two of them that are taking me up on that. And the part of the other thing is once you get started in no-till, it takes a few years before that land really starts to show the benefits of it. And I'm just getting to that point. So I told these guys, if you go ahead and work it up this fall, and you decide 2 years down the road, well, you just lost 5 years of no-till. So let's try it now. And so they're going to do that. And I hope it works for them. It's a mind change.
Are you going on word or did you put that in writing?
Oh, that's in the contract. Yeah.
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 And,
Everything's
and
in the contract.
And I've heard, and I've pitched that exact same thing to other people, when they were like, well, I kind of want to hold on to the land, but I feel really strongly about, let's say, cover crops, and they want their renter to do that. So where did that idea sink hold for you? I mean, you mentioned keeping the investment like it's an apartment or a house or something like that, but where else did you get that idea from?
I really don't know where that came from, Paul. I think it just, one of those things when you're on a tractor one day, you get these crazy ideas and kind of came to me. It's like, yeah, let's do that. And like here yesterday now in northern Minnesota, that we had a winter squall come through, which was a mini blizzard for a couple of hours, a little bit of snow, but 50-mile-an-hour gusts and the whiteout conditions. And now today things have settled down. I went to town this morning and you can see where the dirt has blown on top of the white snow. And, and everything's snow covered, So that's what I'm trying to preserve.
I'm not saying I don't. There's a word I want to use here to describe what you're doing, and I don't know if that is a farmer is a steward of the land. You're not being brave like you're going off to war, but again, you have to have strong convictions in what you're doing and wanting that. I mean, if your kids know what you've been about, Tim, as a farmer for their whole lives. They know what you are. They might not fully see it as much as you had hoped, or that maybe others will. But this is your chance to kind of a next generation pass on. In my eyes, I think it that way. Do you see it that way?
I guess I hadn't thought about that, Paul, but yeah, I mean, you learn from your parents, and if your parents are stewards of the land, you're probably going to be that way. Whether it's a suburban home or it's the farm homestead back in Minnesota.
Do you ever think about these people who retire, then they go into teaching? Does that feel like what you're doing now?
Maybe mentoring. I wouldn't say so much. I got a phone call here this morning. I got to give a call back. A young guy came back to the area mid-career. He's took over from his uncle's farm and he wants to do more soil health and no-till. And he had talked with the local extension agent. She called me a couple days ago because she said, I couldn't answer all his questions, but can I give him your contact information? So he called me. So yeah, I'll sit down with him and tell him what I know, good or bad, but it's something to work off of. So, yeah, I don't feel like a teacher necessarily, but farmers are more than willing to share their opinions, as you probably well know.
No, I've never known a farmer to share their opinion once a day, an hour. Oh, hold on, my phone just went off. I have another opinion that just came in. Who was your mentor? Who do you always cite as someone that helped you in those early years?
Well, of course, my dad.
Yeah.
Um,
But not everybody takes the advice of their parent, though. I guess that's what I'm going for.
well, the best thing I can say about dad is he let me make my own decisions. Once he turned, I was renting some land along with him and we were working together. And then when he finally said, okay, I'm done, it's yours. He never got in my hair about anything, it was like, why didn't you sell when you should have, or why are you planting that? But the only disagreements we'd have is I'd tell him, like in the spring, well, go work this field and then go work that field. And dad would say, well, I'll go work this one and then I'll go work that one. That was about the extent of it. So he was really good to work with. And, him and just other growers. I mean, you can pick up a kernel of knowledge from just about anybody if you listen hard enough. So, just listening to other neighbors really helped.
And there has to be a willingness for that. I mean, there has to be a thirst, a hunger for knowledge. And not everybody has that, though. A lot of people are set. I know what's best, or whatever person drives into my driveway with whatever they're selling, they know best because they're a professional. It's a hard line for farmers to walk, I think, still to this day. That hasn't changed.
No, no. It's just like the whole soil health or going to conservation till, well, we've always done it this way. Why do I want to change? And, I tell people, like, when I was a young teenager, I finally learned how to, plow with a moldboard plow. About the time I got good at that, then dad bought a chisel plow and we didn't moldboard plow anymore. And that has kept changing. And so now we're getting into no-till. And, it's just things like that over a course of a lifetime, you realize nothing stays the same. I mean, we're not farming at all like when I first started farming. And so you got to be willing to change. And so those growers that, no, by God, we've always done it this way and we're always going to do it that way, you're going to lose out in the end on that.
This episode comes after a doubleheader episode where I discussed the book Land Rich, Cash Poor with the author who grew up in Wisconsin. And he talked about diversification of farms, how farms have evolved. He tells the story over 4 generations of his family that raised milk cows, and how his sister at the end said, we're just not going to be able to compete. We've got to get out of the dairy. We're going to have to do some other things. Do you feel, as you look back here, Tim, about diversity and in agriculture, your area is a little different because you do have to grow different crops and kind of always have had that opportunity from the wheat to the corn to the beans. I mean, even 3 crops is better than 2 crops in a lot of areas. But do you feel it in your time that when you talk about this new knowledge or be willing to change that, that your neighborhood, your area has embraced diversity when it comes to farming?
Um, I don't know if embraced. There's a lot of experimental with different crops. Like canola was a thing for a while around here, and found out that we're a little too far south for that. Sunflowers had their day back in the 70s and 80s. Dry edible beans had come in. Potatoes were big when I started. Now they've kind of moved out to where the irrigated areas are. And corn moved in a big way. In a big way. I mean, everybody's putting up large bends and leg systems and dryers. We look like Iowa up here now, where when I started farming, you might have 80 acres of corn, and you hope that it made corn before the frost hit. So they'll experiment. I haven't really seen a lot of diversity. I would have loved if we would have had livestock up here, more livestock. Like Dad told me when he got rid of the cows and the chickens, it was the happiest days of his life. Yeah, I get that. But the more you learn about uh, the whole cycle with manure and raising your own feed, value added, we'd probably be better off if we had some of that up here.
Hmm. And it changes. Yeah, everybody's geography, access to markets. I mean, you're as close to
Yeah.
Canada as anybody is, and you always have to kind of think about that. Relationships. We could spend another episode all on trade issues, but maybe I'll put you and Phil together, and we'll do a trade thing, say February, March. We'll talk about that. Get us all in trouble. Tim, before I wrap here, one of the things that we talked about with the guy that took over our home place, and I was meeting with my mom this summer, and I said, here's the thing, you got to do one thing, and you got to watch Market to Market. So did you, are you wearing your hat around them and tell them they got to, watch the show? It's just selfish. That's all.
No, but I've got their email address because I know some of these guys are the kind of, well, and they're younger, so they've got winter jobs or part-time jobs, so they're busy. But there's some of these extension events or seminars that hey, you might want to take a couple hours and go to this. So I'm going to kind of push them in that direction. Our local soil and water conservation people the last couple of years have had a soil health talks a few times a month during the winter months. And, once you get exposed to some of that, it starts making sense. So maybe get them to that, or maybe get them to some marketing seminars that they, instead of just listening to what everybody else is doing as far as selling crops. So I think I'll be pushing that as far as market to market. Yeah, I always recommend that to everybody.
Oh, we always appreciate it. We've always appreciated your questions. Does this mean you're done asking questions?
Oh no, not at all.
Okay. That'll be good. This is one of those, like, I do a lot of oral histories about it with Iowa broadcasters and things like that. We always kind of ask, what's your legacy? What do you think your legacy, your farming legacy is going to be here, Tim?
That's a good question, Paul. I'll have to get back to you on that one. I mean, I hope 40 years from now, there's 6 producers that are saying, that they're still farming, and maybe I had a little something to do with it. That would be great.
I commend you absolutely for I'm sorry, it's 4 or 6 different farmers. 6. That's amazing. That's a way also it's going to be kind of fun to see how everybody approaches things differently. And somebody might have some grand new idea on something, and you're going to have to probably bite your knuckle for a minute. It's like, we tried that. It didn't quite work, but maybe something changes in it it will work this time. That's probably going to be the hardest thing for you come spring,
Well,
isn't it?
right. And like I said earlier about my dad just leaving me alone, I'm going to have to
Right.
leave these guys alone. It's like, hey, there's more than one way to skin a cat. I'm going to leave you alone. I don't agree with it, but go for it, guy.
Yeah. Yeah. And they ask you, and that, if they ask you, you'll, I'm sure, give them a response.
Yeah, yeah,
Okay.
and they're good, thoughtful guys. So I'm not afraid of that. That they're going to want to engage me, and well, what do you think? So yeah, that'll be good.
You mentioned travel is something that would be, the bit, not necessarily you're going to travel nonstop, but you can do things in April, May, September,
Right.
October. Is there anything that you've targeted over the years when you're sitting on the tractor bouncing around going, we're going to do that?
Well, it just take off for a long weekend or something. But you know, again, PBS, those Viking voyages. Yeah, I've got a couple catalogs sitting around here. So my wife's always been a big Egyptian nut. So it's like, let's take a Nile River cruise. Let's see what that's like. And I've heard from people that have done this, and it's just fantastic. And so some of that kind of stuff, wintertime, drive around, see the country a little more.
Well, I appreciate it. Thank you so much, Tim, for your insight. And I always look forward when I see a question coming from you, and we can, because it's just, again, it's important you have a different perspective than they do in Southern Illinois, than they do in Minnesota, or in Southern Minnesota and Wisconsin. That is the beauty of what we do anyway. And so I'm always glad that helping us out. I greatly appreciate it.
Mo, my pleasure. I like reading those questions from the other people that don't get on this air, because it's like, oh yeah, that's a darn good question. Yeah, I hope they ask that one too. So
Yeah. Well, we'll
everybody's
see.
got good ideas.
Some of them someday we might actually ask all of them and get all of us in trouble. Because some of those analysts, I'll read them. I don't know if I've ever told you this. I'll read most of the questions. I don't read them before the show. I only tell them the one during the show. I'm like, hey, this one's a little different than normal. I'm going to read the question. But those ones in plus, I will kind of say, you want to talk about this? You okay with this? Yep. And then I'll get the no on certain ones for whatever reason. Just they might not know something about it, hadn't done the research, or they don't want to touch it with a 10-foot pole. So you just never know what you're going to get. All right, Tim, thank you so much.
All right, you bet, Paul. Have a good day.
Thank you very much for watching. New episodes come out each and every Tuesday from Market to Market and the MTOM podcast. Thanks for watching. Bye-bye.